Savannah Reed adjusted her diamond tennis bracelet as she stepped out of her white BMW convertible onto the pristine sidewalk of Buckhead, Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhood. At 26, she embodied everything her upscale world expected. Blonde, highlights perfectly styled designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and an attitude that suggested the world existed solely for her convenience. Savannah Darling. Her best friend, Ashley Coleman, waved from the entrance of the Capitol Grill, their usual lunch spot where a simple salad cost $40. "You look absolutely stunning as always," Savannah smiled, the kind of practiced expression she'd perfected at debutante balls and charity galas. "Thank you, Ash. Love your new Hermes bag. Is that the limited edition one from Paris?" As they settled into their corner booth, Savannah noticed a news report playing on the restaurant's flat-screen television. The anchor was discussing protests happening just 15 minutes away in downtown Atlanta, where working-class communities were demanding better public transportation and job opportunities. "Can you believe they're still complaining about that?" Ashley rolled her eyes, sipping her cucumber water. "If they worked as hard as they protested, maybe they wouldn't need handouts." Savannah nodded absently, her attention already shifting to the menu. "Exactly. My father always says people make their own luck. Look at our families. We earned everything we have through hard work and smart decisions." The news segment showed a young black man speaking passionately at a podium, his voice barely audible over the restaurant's classical music. Savannah glanced at the screen for a split second before dismissing it entirely. These people always wanted something for nothing, she thought. If they focused on bettering themselves instead of making noise, they'd get somewhere in life. Speaking of hard work, Ashley leaned forward conspiratorially. "Did you hear what happened at the Monroe Foundation Gala last week? Apparently, they're considering adding some diverse board members. Can you imagine? The foundation has maintained its standards for over 50 years. Savannah raised an eyebrow. "Diverse how?" "You know," Ashley lowered her voice. "People who don't really understand our world. Our parents built these institutions with their own money and connections. Now everyone thinks they deserve a seat at the table without putting in the work." The conversation flowed naturally into gossip about their social circle, weekend plans in the Hamptons, and complaints about their personal trainers. For Savannah, this was simply life, a perfectly curated existence where problems were solved with money, connections, and the right zip code. As they left the restaurant, Savannah felt completely secure in her worldview. Some people were simply born into circumstances that set them up for success while others weren't. It wasn't personal or cruel. It was just the natural order of things. She had worked hard to maintain her position, attending the right schools, making the right connections, and surrounding herself with people who understood quality and standards. Walking toward her car, she passed a homeless veteran holding a cardboard sign. Without breaking stride or making eye contact, she quickened her pace. These situations made her uncomfortable, but Ashley's father, who served on the city council, had explained that giving money to panhandlers only encouraged dependency. The system was there to help people who truly wanted to change their circumstances. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. That evening, Savannah sat in her family's sprawling estate in Sandy Springs, the kind of home that appeared in Southern Living magazine. Her parents, Richard and Patricia Reed, owned a successful commercial real estate empire built over 3 generations. The dining room where they shared dinner could have seated 20 people comfortably, its crystal chandelier casting warm light over antique furniture that cost more than most people's cars. "How was lunch with Ashley today, sweetheart?" Patricia asked, delicately cutting her herb-crusted salmon. Even at 52, she maintained the polished elegance that had made her Atlanta's most sought-after social hostess. "Lovely as always," Savannah replied, twirling her fork in her quinoa salad. We discussed the Monroe Foundation situation. Ashley mentioned they're considering some questionable additions to the board. Richard looked up from his wine, his expression sharpening. At 55, he commanded respect in boardrooms across the Southeast. Questionable how? Apparently, they want to add diversity for the sake of diversity rather than merit, Savannah explained. People who haven't contributed to the foundation's success, but expect equal representation. Patricia nodded knowingly. Your father and I see this everywhere now. The country club, the hospital board, even the museum auxiliary. People demanding positions they haven't earned through proper channels. It's not that we're against anyone succeeding, Richard added, his voice carrying the authority that had built their fortune. But there's a process, a system that works. Our family donated over $2 million to that foundation. We've served on committees, organized fundraisers, brought in other families to support their causes. That's how you earn influence. Savannah felt validated hearing her parents articulate what she instinctively believed. They weren't prejudiced. They were practical. Success required sacrifice, education, networking, and substantial financial investment. Her parents had worked tirelessly to build their legacy, often missing family dinners to close deals or attend business functions. Remember, Patricia continued, when your grandmother started the Women's Auxiliary at Piedmont Hospital, she spent 20 years volunteering, learning every aspect of hospital operations before anyone considered her for leadership. That's earning your place. Exactly, Richard agreed. People today want shortcuts. They see our lifestyle and assume it was handed to us, but they don't see the 18-hour days, the risk-taking, the strategic relationships we've cultivated over decades. After dinner, Savannah retreated to her childhood bedroom, now converted into a sophisticated guest suite. Looking out at the manicured gardens and swimming pool, she reflected on her family's journey. Her great-grandfather had started with a small construction company, working manual labor before gradually building a business empire. Every generation had sacrificed and strategically invested to create more opportunities for the next. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Heard from Stephanie that they hired a new diversity coordinator at the hospital. Apparently, she's demanding they examine their hiring practices. As if Piedmont doesn't have the best reputation in the state. Savannah typed back, "That's exactly what Daddy was talking about. Instead of proving their value, they want to change the rules." Sitting on her king-sized bed, surrounded by family photos from European vacations and charity galas, Savannah felt confident in her worldview. She wasn't racist or classist. She simply understood that society functioned best when people earned their positions through merit and contribution. Her family had proven their worth through generations of hard work, financial success, and community involvement. The protesters on today's news didn't understand this system. They wanted immediate results without putting in the decades of effort. Her family had invested. It wasn't personal animosity. It was logical reasoning based on how the world actually worked. Some people were simply raised with different values and work ethics. Tomorrow she would return to her marketing position at her father's company, a role she'd earned through her business degree from Emory University and her understanding of the family business. She would continue building relationships within her social circle, supporting causes that aligned with her values and maintaining the standards that had served her family so well. The next morning, Savannah arrived at Reed Commercial Properties' gleaming office tower in Midtown Atlanta. As marketing director, she managed relationships with high-end clients and coordinated the company's social responsibility initiatives, carefully chosen charities that enhanced their corporate image while providing meaningful tax benefits. Good morning, Ms. Reed. The receptionist, Maria Santos, greeted her warmly. Maria had worked for the company for 8 years, always professional and efficient. Savannah appreciated employees who understood their role and performed it well. Morning, Maria. Could you have someone from maintenance check the executive conference room? I noticed yesterday the temperature was slightly off, and we have the Peterson Group presentation at 2. Of course, I'll call them right away. Savannah smiled and continued to her corner office. This was how things worked smoothly, clear, expectations, proper hierarchies, and mutual respect. Maria knew her job, performed it excellently, and in return received good benefits and job security. It was a perfect example of the system working as intended. Around 11, Savannah walked to the building's coffee shop for her usual oat milk latte. The shop was busy with the morning rush, filled with lawyers, executives, and other professionals who worked in the building. She stood in line behind a woman wearing scrubs, presumably a nurse from the medical offices on the 7th floor. When the woman reached the counter, she ordered a simple black coffee and a muffin, then pulled out a handful of crumpled dollar bills and quarters. "I'm sorry," she said to the barista. "I'm 50 cents short. Could I just get the coffee?" The barista, a young man probably working his way through college, looked apologetic. "I wish I could, but my manager counts everything." Savannah watched, the interaction with mild annoyance. She had meetings to attend and couldn't afford to wait while this woman sorted through her change. The delay was exactly why she usually had her assistant pick up her coffee. "Excuse me," Savannah said, stepping forward with her platinum credit card. "I'll cover the difference." The woman turned, surprise and gratitude evident in her eyes. "Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind." "No problem at all," Savannah replied with a practiced smile, the kind she used at charity functions. She handed the card to the barista. "And I'll take my usual, large oat milk latte with an extra shot." As they waited for their orders, the woman extended her hand. "I'm Linda Washington. I work in pediatric nursing upstairs. Thank you again. It's been a tough month with my son's school expenses." Savannah Reed, happy to help. She shook Linda's hand briefly, already mentally moving on to her presentation preparation. "Reed, as in Reed Commercial Properties? I see the signs on buildings all over the city." "That's us," Savannah confirmed with pride. "My father built the company from the ground up. We're very committed to being part of Atlanta's business community." Their coffees arrived, and Savannah was ready to end the conversation politely. But Linda continued talking as they walked toward the elevators. "That's amazing. You know, I've been trying to find affordable housing closer to the hospital. The commute from my neighborhood adds 2 hours to my day, and with my schedule, it's exhausting. I've looked at some of your company's residential properties, but the application requirements are pretty steep for someone like me." Savannah pressed the elevator button, maintaining her pleasant expression while mentally noting that Linda probably didn't qualify for their premium properties. Their application process was thorough for good reason. It ensured responsible tenants who maintained property values and paid rent on time. "Our requirements are industry standard," Savannah explained diplomatically. "We've found that thorough screening protects both the property owner and other tenants. Have you considered looking in different neighborhoods? Sometimes moving further out can be more budget-friendly." Linda nodded, though something in her expression suggested disappointment. "I understand. It's just challenging when you're working 12-hour shifts and trying to be present for your kids. But I appreciate the advice." The elevator arrived, and they rode up together in comfortable silence. When Linda got off at the 7th floor, she turned back with a genuine smile. "Thanks again for the coffee. It was nice meeting you, Savannah." "You too, Linda. Take care." As the elevator continued upward, Savannah felt good about the interaction. She had helped someone in need without making a big show of it, exactly how her parents had taught her to handle these situations. Linda seemed like a nice person, hardworking and responsible, even if her financial circumstances were challenging. The housing situation was unfortunate but understandable. Their properties were investment-grade real estate in desirable neighborhoods. The application requirements, credit score minimums, income verification, employment history, weren't arbitrary barriers. They were necessary protections that maintained property values and ensured stable communities. People like Linda had options, just different ones that matched their financial reality. There were affordable housing programs, different neighborhoods, with lower costs and pathways to improve credit and income over time. The system provided opportunities for everyone. They just needed to be realistic about their current position and work toward their goals systematically. Walking back to her office, Savannah felt satisfied with how she'd handled the morning. She had been kind without being condescending, helpful without overstepping boundaries, and honest without being harsh. It was exactly the kind of balanced approach that allowed different social classes to interact respectfully while maintaining appropriate expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from her college friend, Cameron Mitchell. "Drinks tonight at the rooftop bar? Need to celebrate closing the Henderson account." She typed back, "Absolutely. I'll bring Ashley and the girls. This calls for champagne." Tonight she would celebrate with friends who understood hard work, success, and the satisfaction of achieving goals through proper effort. But first, she needed to perfect her presentation for the Peterson Group, another step in building her own career legacy. The rooftop bar at the St. Regis Hotel buzzed with Atlanta's young professional crowd. Savannah and her friends had claimed their usual corner table with panoramic city views, champagne glasses catching the golden hour sunlight. Cameron Mitchell, her friend since their Emory University days, was in full celebration mode after landing a major client for his family's investment firm. "To another victory for the good guys." Cameron raised his glass, his bow tie slightly loosened after 2 drinks. "The Henderson account is worth 8 figures annually." "Cheers to that," Ashley laughed, clinking glasses with the group. "Your daddy must be so proud." Savannah smiled, genuinely happy for Cameron's success. Their group represented Atlanta's next generation of business leaders, people who understood the value of hard work, proper connections, and strategic thinking. These were the relationships that would shape the city's future. The bar's atmosphere was perfect: jazz music, elegant decor, and a clientele that knew how to conduct themselves appropriately in upscale environments. This was Savannah's comfort zone, surrounded by people who shared her values and understood proper social etiquette. Around 9 o'clock, she excused herself to use the restroom, walking through the bar's main seating area. Near the entrance, she noticed a commotion at one of the tables. A tall black man was standing, speaking intensely to someone seated across from him. "I'm telling you, Marcus, the community center funding was cut deliberately," the man said, his voice carrying despite the music. "They approved 3 country club renovations this quarter, but claim they don't have money for after-school programs." Savannah slowed her pace, curious despite herself. The man was probably in his late 20s, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked expensive but not flashy. His presence commanded attention, not through loudness or aggression, but through obvious intelligence and passion. "Darius, man, you can't fight City Hall forever," his friend Marcus replied. "Maybe it's time to work within the system instead of always challenging it." "Work within a system that's designed to exclude us?" Darius Johnson shook his head. 3 generations of my family have tried playing by their rules. My grandfather was a Tuskegee airman, my father built a successful law practice, and I have an MBA from Northwestern. But somehow, we're still not qualified for the same opportunities. Savannah found herself stopped completely now, struck by something in his voice. She expected anger, but heard profound disappointment instead. Frustration? Yes, but also a depth of understanding that surprised her. Marcus stood up, clearly ready to leave. "I hear you, brother, but this fight is wearing you down. Maybe take a break. Focus on your consulting business." "Can't take a break from being black in America, Marcus." As Marcus left, Darius sat back down heavily, staring at his untouched beer. Without fully understanding why, Savannah found herself walking over to his table. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice softer than intended. "I couldn't help overhearing. You mentioned Northwestern. I have friends who went there. Great business school." Darius looked up, his expression shifting to polite wariness. "It is. Thanks. I'm Savannah." She extended her hand, then immediately felt awkward about the gesture. Your conversation sounded interesting. Community centers are important." "Darius." He shook her hand briefly. "And they are important, especially in neighborhoods that have been systematically underinvested in for decades." Something in his tone made her defensive. "Well, I'm sure the city budget has many competing priorities. Infrastructure, public safety, education, all of which affect every neighborhood," Darius interrupted, but not rudely. "The question is which neighborhoods get prioritized when resources are limited." Savannah felt herself bristling slightly. "I'm sure decisions are made based on objective criteria: population density, usage statistics, maintenance costs. Darius smiled, but there was no humor in it. Objective criteria. Right. He took a sip of his beer, studying her face. Let me guess. You grew up in Buckhead or Sandy Springs, went to private school, probably a sorority at UGA or Emory? Emory, she admitted, surprised by his accuracy. But I don't see what that has to do with city budget allocation. Everything. Darius leaned forward, his intensity focused but not threatening. Those objective criteria were designed by people who grew up exactly like you did. People who've never had to choose between a car repair and their child's school supplies. People who think poverty is a character flaw instead of a systemic issue. That's not fair, Savannah protested. You don't know anything about me or my family. We've worked hard for everything we have. I'm sure you have, Darius replied. But you've also had advantages you probably don't even recognize. Safety nets, connections, opportunities that were never available to families like mine. Families like yours? The words came out sharper than she intended. Black families, working-class families, families who've been fighting for generations just to get equal access to quality education, healthcare, housing. Darius's voice remained steady, but she could see the passion burning behind his eyes. Your family built wealth, mine survived. Savannah felt heat rising in her cheeks. You're making a lot of assumptions about me. And honestly, this conversation feels pretty reverse racist. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Darius's expression didn't change, but something cooled in his eyes. Reverse racist, he repeated quietly. That's an interesting term. He stood up, placing a $20 bill on the table. You know what? You're right. I don't know you, but I know that phrase. And I know exactly the kind of person who uses it. Wait, Savannah said, suddenly not wanting him to leave. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Darius looked at her directly, and she felt exposed in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. You meant exactly what you said. The moment someone challenges your worldview, you play victim. That's privilege talking. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing alone by his table. The $20 bill sat there like an accusation. He'd paid for a beer. He never finished rather than continue talking to her. Walking back to her friends, Savannah felt unsettled in a way she couldn't articulate. The conversation had gone wrong somehow, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly where or why. She'd tried to be friendly, to find common ground, but he'd immediately made assumptions about her background and attacked her character. You look flustered, Ashley observed as Savannah rejoined their group. Everything okay? Just a weird conversation with some guy, Savannah replied, accepting a fresh glass of champagne. He was very intense about politics. Oh, God, not one of those. Cameron rolled his eyes. They're everywhere now, making everything about race and inequality. Can't just enjoy life. Savannah nodded, but something felt hollow about the agreement. As her friends continued celebrating, her mind kept returning to Darius's words. Your family built wealth. Mine survived. What had he meant by that? And why did she feel like she'd failed some test she didn't even know she was taking? 3 days later, Savannah couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She'd tried to dismiss Darius's words as the rantings of someone looking for excuses, but something about his calm intensity had gotten under her skin. The way he'd looked at her, not with anger, but with disappointment, kept replaying in her. Mine Thursday morning found her in her office, staring at quarterly marketing reports without really seeing them. Her assistant knocked and entered with her usual coffee and stack of invitations to charity events. The Children's Hospital Gala needs your RSVP, Jennifer said, organizing the papers efficiently. And the Heritage Foundation wants to discuss a partnership for their scholarship program. The Heritage Foundation? Savannah looked up. What kind of scholarship program? Merit-based awards for underprivileged students pursuing business degrees. They want Reed Commercial Properties as a sponsor. Savannah found herself thinking about Linda Washington from the coffee shop, struggling to afford housing while working, 12-hour nursing shifts. Then, uncomfortably, about Darius's words regarding equal access to education. What are the scholarship criteria? She asked. Jennifer consulted her notes. Academic achievement, financial need, and a commitment to giving back to their communities. The foundation emphasizes helping students who wouldn't otherwise have access to quality higher education. And we'd sponsor how many scholarships? They're requesting funding for 5 full scholarships annually, plus mentorship from our executives. Savannah nodded absently. 5 scholarships. The amount her father spent on wine for a single dinner party. But the mentorship component was interesting. These students would gain access to professional networks that might otherwise remain closed to them. Schedule a meeting with them for next week, she decided. That afternoon, she found herself driving through downtown Atlanta instead of taking her usual route home. Without conscious intention, she ended up in the neighborhoods where the protests had been happening, areas she'd only seen from news reports. What she saw surprised her. Yes, there were run-down buildings and obvious signs of disinvestment. But there were also small businesses, community gardens, and children playing in parks. Families going about their daily lives, working people heading home from jobs. She stopped at a red light next to a community center, the kind of place Darius had mentioned losing funding. A sign out front advertised after-school tutoring, job, training programs, and free tax preparation services. Through the windows, she could see children at computers and adults in what looked like a classroom setting. A knock on her passenger window startled her. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, stood beside her car holding a cardboard sign. Car wash for school band, $5. Savannah rolled down her window. "Hi there, where's the car wash?" "Right over there." The girl pointed to the community center parking lot where several other children and some adults were washing cars. "We're raising money for new instruments. Want us to wash your car?" "Sure," Savannah heard herself saying. She followed the girl to the parking lot and watched as the group efficiently organized around her BMW. The children worked with obvious pride, some of them directing traffic while others handled different aspects of the washing process. An older woman, probably supervising the fundraiser, approached with a clipboard. "Thank you so much for supporting our kids. I'm Dorothy Miller, the music director. Savannah Reed, how much do you need to raise?" "For the instruments?" "About $3,000. These kids have been working every weekend for 2 months. We had a music program for 20 years until budget cuts last year." Dorothy's voice carried the same disappointment Savannah had heard from Darius. Music kept a lot of these children focused and off the streets. "Budget cuts?" Savannah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "City funding was reallocated to higher priority programs," Dorothy explained with air quotes. "Meanwhile, they approved a $500,000 renovation for the tennis courts in Buckhead Park." Savannah felt something twist in her stomach. Those were the tennis courts she played on with Ashley every Tuesday. As the children finished her car, she watched them work with genuine care and attention to detail. They took pride in their job, joking with each other but staying focused on quality. She thought about her earlier conversation with Jennifer about scholarship criteria, academic achievement, commitment to community. "The car looks great," she told the girl who'd approached her originally. "What instrument do you want to play?" "Violin." The girl's eyes lit up. "My grandma says my great-grandfather played violin, but we don't have any pictures or nothing. I want to learn the songs he knew." Savannah pulled out her wallet and removed a $100 bill. "This is for you specifically, for violin lessons when you get your instrument." The girl's eyes went wide. "For real? Thank you, miss." Driving away, Savannah felt simultaneously good and deeply unsettled. The children's enthusiasm was infectious, their work ethic admirable. Dorothy Miller was clearly dedicated to their development. But the fact that they had to wash cars to afford basic musical instruments while tennis courts received $500,000 in improvements, that bothered her in ways she didn't want to examine. That evening, she called her father about the Heritage Foundation Scholarship Program. 5 scholarships? Richard mused. That's a substantial commitment. What's the return on investment? Community goodwill, positive press, and potentially identifying talented employees early, Savannah replied, though those weren't the real reasons she wanted to pursue it. "Make sure their selection criteria align with our values," he warned. "We don't want to be associated with social justice crusading. Stick to merit-based awards for students who demonstrate personal responsibility." After hanging up, Savannah sat in her bedroom looking out at the manicured gardens. Personal responsibility. Merit-based awards. The words felt different now, heavier somehow. She thought about the violin girl working weekends to support her school band, about Linda Washington, trying to find affordable housing closer to her nursing job, about Dorothy Miller, watching 20 years of music education disappear due to budget cuts. Were these people not demonstrating personal responsibility? Were their efforts not merit-based? For the first time in her life, Savannah found herself questioning not just individual decisions, but the entire system she'd always trusted. The system that had worked so well for her family, was it possibly designed to work less well for others? The thought was uncomfortable, revolutionary even. But as she remembered Darius's disappointed expression and his words about families who survived versus families who built wealth, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been missing something important her entire life, something that might change everything if she let it. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment, and it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. 2 weeks after their confrontation at the rooftop bar, Savannah found herself thinking about Darius Johnson more than she cared to admit. His words had planted seeds of doubt that grew stronger each day, especially after her visit to the community center car wash. She'd found herself researching Northwestern's MBA program, wondering about his background and what had led him to Atlanta. Friday afternoon brought unexpected answers. Savannah was leaving a client meeting in downtown Atlanta when she witnessed something that would reshape her understanding of the man who'd challenged her worldview so forcefully. Heavy rain had caught the city off guard, turning streets into temporary rivers. Savannah hurried toward her covered parking garage, designer heels clicking against wet pavement. That's when she saw the crowd gathering near the MARTA station entrance. "Someone call 911, a voice shouted. "There's been an accident." Curiosity overrode her desire to stay dry. Savannah approached the scene, where a small crowd had formed around someone on the ground. An elderly black man in a maintenance uniform lay crumpled at the bottom of the station stairs, his cleaning cart scattered beside him. He was conscious, but obviously in pain, attempting to sit up despite what appeared to be a serious leg injury. "Don't move him," another voice called out. "Could be a spinal injury." That's when Savannah saw Darius Johnson kneeling beside the injured man, his business suit soaking in the rain. He spoke in calm, authoritative tones while applying pressure to what looked like a bleeding head wound. "Sir, I need you to stay still for me," Darius said gently. "I know it hurts, but help is coming. What's your name?" "Jerome," the man whispered, his voice shaky. "Jerome Washington." Savannah's breath caught. Washington, the same last name as Linda, the nurse she'd met in the coffee shop. "Jerome, I'm Darius. I'm going to stay right here with you until the paramedics arrive. Can you tell me where you're hurting the most?" "My leg, and my head's pounding something fierce." Darius had somehow produced a clean cloth and was expertly managing the head wound while simultaneously checking Jerome's pulse. His movements were professional, confident, like someone with medical training. "Were you in the military, Jerome?" Darius asked, clearly trying to keep the man conscious and calm. "Navy, 22 years. Jerome managed a weak smile. "Served on 3 different ships." "Outstanding. Thank you for your service." "I was Army myself. Did a tour in Afghanistan before business school." Savannah felt her assumptions shifting. Army, service, medical training, business school at Northwestern. This wasn't the picture she'd painted of Darius in her mind. A young woman pushed through the crowd, panic evident in her voice. "Daddy! Daddy, are you okay?" It was Linda Washington, still in her nursing scrubs, dropping to her knees beside her. "Father, I got the call at work. What happened?" "Linda." Darius looked up, recognition crossing his face. "Your father slipped on the wet stairs. Possible concussion and definitely a leg injury, but his vitals are stable." "You know each other?" Linda asked, surprised even as she began her own medical assessment of her father. "We've met briefly," Savannah said, stepping forward before she could stop herself. "At the coffee shop in Midtown." Both Linda and Darius looked up at her, surprise evident on their faces. Darius's expression was unreadable, but Linda's showed recognition and warmth. "Savannah, you're the woman who helped me with coffee last week. Thank you again for that kindness." "It was nothing," Savannah replied, feeling suddenly small under Darius's steady gaze. The paramedics arrived, efficiently taking over Jerome's care. As they prepared him for transport, Linda grabbed Darius's hand. "Thank you for taking care of him. As a nurse, I know good emergency care when I see it. You may have prevented serious complications." "Anyone would have done the same," Darius replied, but Linda shook her head. "No, they wouldn't have. Most people were just standing around watching. You took charge and knew exactly what to do." She turned to include Savannah. "Both of you came forward when it mattered." As the ambulance pulled away with Jerome and Linda, the crowd dispersed. Savannah found herself standing alone with Darius in the rain, both of them soaked and awkward. "Your suit is ruined," she said finally, noticing the blood stains on his white shirt. "Suits can be replaced," he replied simply. "Jerome's health can't." They walked toward the parking garage together in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Savannah spoke. "You have medical training." "Combat medic in the Army before my MBA," Darius confirmed. "Figured business skills combined with military discipline might open doors that were closed to previous generations of my family." "And did they?" Darius stopped walking and looked at her directly. "Some doors, not others. Turns out an MBA from Northwestern and military service don't override certain assumptions people make about young black men in America." Savannah felt heat rising in her cheeks, remembering her own assumptions about him at the bar. "I owe you an apology for what I said the other night, the reverse racism comment. That was ignorant." "It was," Darius agreed, but his tone wasn't cruel. "But at least you're willing to admit it. That's more than most people do." They reached her car and she hesitated before getting in. "What you did back there, for Jerome, that was incredible. You could have just kept walking like everyone else." "Could you have?" Darius asked. "Really?" The question caught her off guard. She thought about her reaction, how she'd immediately moved toward the crisis instead of away from it. "No, I couldn't have." "Then maybe we're not as different as I thought," Darius said quietly. "Maybe the problem isn't who you are, but what you've been taught to believe about people like me." As he walked away toward his own car, Savannah sat in her BMW for several minutes, engine running, trying to process what she'd witnessed. The man who'd challenged her so forcefully at the bar, who'd made her feel small and privileged and defensive, had just demonstrated more courage, competence, and compassion than she'd seen from anyone in her social circle in years. He hadn't helped Jerome for recognition or reward. He'd done it because it was right, because his training and character demanded. He acted when someone needed help. The military service, the medical skills, the way he'd calmed both Jerome and Linda. This was someone who'd spent his life serving others, and she'd dismissed him as someone looking for handouts and playing victim. Driving home through the rain, Savannah couldn't escape the growing realization that everything she thought she knew about merit, character, and worthiness was being challenged by the reality of who Darius Johnson actually was. The next evening, Savannah attended the monthly dinner party at her parents' estate, a tradition that brought together Atlanta's most influential families. The guest list read like a who's who of Southern high society: the Prestons, who owned the largest law firm in the Southeast; the Hamiltons, whose banking empire spanned 3 states; and the Thorntons, whose real estate development company had shaped Atlanta's skyline for decades. "Savannah, darling, you look stunning as always," Mrs. Elizabeth Preston greeted her with air kisses. "That dress is divine. Is it the new Valentino collection?" "Thank you, Mrs. Preston. Yes, I picked it up in New York last week." Savannah accepted a glass of champagne from the server, settling into the familiar rhythm of social pleasantries and status displays. The conversation flowed through predictable channels: vacation homes in the Hamptons, children's acceptance, to prestigious universities and complaints about various social changes affecting their comfortable world. "I swear the city has lost its mind," Thomas Hamilton declared over the appetizer course. "They're talking about affordable housing requirements for new developments. 40 years I've been in banking, and now they want us to subsidize people who can't qualify for market-rate loans." Savannah's father nodded emphatically. "It's the same everywhere. The hospital board is being pressured to add community representatives, people with no medical background or fundraising history, demanding equal votes on policy decisions. Don't get me started on the school board," added Margaret Thornton. "They want to change admission standards for the magnet programs, claiming the current system is somehow discriminatory. These programs exist to serve gifted students, not to meet diversity quotas." Usually, Savannah would have joined this conversation enthusiastically. These were her people, discussing legitimate concerns about maintaining standards and protecting institutions that had served the community well for decades. But tonight, she found herself thinking about Jerome Washington cleaning those MARTA stairs for probably minimum wage, about his daughter Linda working 12-hour nursing shifts and still struggling to find affordable housing. "The problem," Mrs. Preston continued, "is that these people don't understand how our systems work. They want immediate results without putting in the years of service and financial commitment that earn you influence." "Exactly right, Elizabeth," Patricia Reed agreed. "Your family has donated over $5 million to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta over 20 years. That's how you earn a board position, not by complaining about representation." Savannah took a sip of wine, remembering Darius's words. "Your family built wealth. Mine survived." For the first time, she wondered what it meant to spend generations just surviving, instead of building influence and legacy. "I heard something troubling at the club yesterday." Thomas Hamilton lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Apparently there's a group trying to get the membership committee to change our sponsor requirements. They claim the current system excludes qualified candidates based on social factors." "Social factors?" Richard Reed raised an eyebrow. "You know what they mean," Thomas replied with obvious distaste. "They want us to lower our standards and ignore the fact that membership is about cultural fit, not just financial capability." The table murmured agreement, but Savannah felt uncomfortable. Cultural fit. She'd heard that phrase her entire life, used to explain why certain people didn't belong in certain spaces. But what did it really mean? That people who hadn't grown up with generational wealth couldn't learn proper etiquette? That different cultural backgrounds automatically created discord? "The Heritage Foundation called this week," she said carefully, testing the waters. "They want Reed Commercial Properties to sponsor scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing business degrees." "Heritage Foundation?" Margaret Thornton frowned. "Isn't that the organization that's been pushing all this social justice nonsense?" "I believe they focus on merit-based scholarships," Savannah replied, though she realized she wasn't entirely sure. "Savannah, sweetheart," her mother's voice carried a gentle warning, "you need to be very careful about organizations that use words like underprivileged. Often these groups have political agendas that don't align with our values. But if the scholarships are truly merit-based—" "Merit according to whose definition?" interrupted James Thornton, Margaret's husband. "These organizations often define merit differently than we do. They might prioritize sob stories over academics, achievement, or worse, consider race as a qualification factor." Richard Reed looked at his daughter with concern. "Savannah, what's bringing this up? You've always understood the importance of maintaining standards in our charitable giving." All eyes turned to her, and Savannah felt the weight of their collective expectation. These were people she'd respected her entire life, successful leaders, who'd built thriving businesses and supported countless legitimate charities. They weren't cruel or heartless. They were practical people protecting institutions and standards that had served society well. "I just want to make sure we're considering all qualified candidates," she said finally, aware of how weak it sounded. "Of course we are," her father replied gently. "But qualification means more than just need, sweetheart. It means character, values alignment, and demonstrated commitment to excellence. We can't help everyone, so we focus our resources on people who share our work ethic and moral standards." The conversation moved on to safer topics, but Savannah felt isolated in her growing doubts. Around the table sat some of Atlanta's most respected citizens, people who'd built hospitals, funded scholarships, and created thousands of jobs. They weren't villains, they were pillars of the community. So why did their reasoning feel increasingly hollow? After dinner, Ashley pulled her aside on the terrace. "Are you feeling okay tonight? You seem distracted." "Just tired," Savannah replied, but Ashley's expression showed she wasn't convinced. "Is this about that guy from the bar? The one who gave you a hard time about politics?" Savannah hesitated. She'd mentioned the encounter to Ashley but hadn't shared her growing doubts about the conversation. "Not exactly." "Good. Because honestly, Savannah, you can't let people like that get in your head. They're professional victims who want to tear down everything our families have built." Ashley's voice carried the certainty Savannah had once felt about these issues. "They don't understand the sacrifices and hard work that created the opportunities they claim to deserve." Walking to her car later, Savannah felt caught between two worlds that seemed increasingly incompatible. Her family and friends weren't wrong about the importance of hard work, merit, and maintaining standards. But Darius wasn't wrong either about systemic barriers and unequal opportunities. The question that kept haunting her was whether both things could be true simultaneously, whether the system that had rewarded her family's efforts might also be structured in ways that made success harder for others to achieve. It was a dangerous thought, one that threatened everything she'd been taught to believe about fairness, merit, and the natural order of society. But once planted, it seemed impossible to uproot. 3 days later, Savannah found herself doing something she'd never imagined, sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Atlanta, waiting for Darius Johnson. She'd called him after getting his number from Linda Washington, who'd been thrilled to facilitate what she assumed was a budding friendship. The coffee shop was nothing like her usual haunts. No marble countertops or imported Italian espresso machines, just honest coffee served by people who worked for tips rather than career advancement. She felt conspicuous in her tailored blazer and designer handbag, but also oddly comfortable. In the unpretentious atmosphere, Darius arrived exactly on time, looking professional in a navy suit, but somehow more approachable than during their previous encounters. He ordered black coffee, no elaborate specifications, and joined her at a corner table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Savannah said, genuinely nervous. "I know our last conversations didn't go well." "They went exactly as I expected them to go," Darius replied, but not unkindly. "Question is, why did you want to try again?" Savannah took a breath, trying to find the right words. "Because I think you were right about some things, and I think I've been wrong about some things, but I need to understand better." "Understand what specifically?" "How someone like you, military service, Northwestern MBA, obvious intelligence and character, can believe the system is rigged when it seems like you've succeeded within it." Darius studied her face for a moment, apparently deciding whether she was genuinely curious or just looking for ammunition for another argument. "Can I ask you something first?" he said. "When you were growing up, how many black families lived in your neighborhood?" The question caught her off guard. None, I think. But that wasn't by design, it was just how the demographics worked out." "Right. And at your private school?" "Maybe 2 or 3 black students per class. But the school had need-based scholarships." 2 or 3 out of how many total students?" "About 60 per grade." Savannah did the math and felt uncomfortable. "So 5% maybe. And at Emory in your business classes?" She thought about her MBA cohort. "Similar, I suppose. But that reflected the applicant pool." "Stop." Darius held up a hand, but gently. "I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to help you see something. Your entire educational and social experience happened in spaces that were 95% white and upper middle class or higher. That's not an accident. But those institutions don't exclude anyone. They're merit-based. Merit according to standards created by and for people from backgrounds like yours." Darius leaned forward, his voice patient but intense. "Let me tell you about merit from my perspective. I graduated valedictorian from a public high school in East Atlanta, where half the textbooks were older than I was. I worked 2 jobs to help support my family while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I enlisted in the army because it was the only way to pay for college without crushing debt. Savannah listened, beginning to see where this was going. In Afghanistan, I saved lives under enemy fire, came back, used the GI Bill to get through undergrad, then borrowed $60,000 for my MBA at Northwestern, graduated in the top 10%. Darius paused, watching her reaction. Every step of that journey required more effort, more risk, and more sacrifice than anything most people in your world have ever faced. I don't doubt that, Savannah said quietly. But that proves the system works, doesn't it? You succeeded despite the obstacles. I survived the system, Darius corrected. There's a difference. And for every one of me who made it through, there are dozens who had the same merit, the same work ethic, the same intelligence, but didn't have the combination of luck, health, family support, and pure stubborn determination required to overcome all the barriers. Savannah thought about the children at the community center car wash, working weekends to buy musical instruments that should have been provided by basic educational funding. But what's the alternative? She asked. How do you maintain standards while also addressing inequities? First, you have to acknowledge that current standards aren't actually neutral or objective. Darius pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. This is my nephew, Marcus. He's 8 years old, loves science, wants to be an engineer. He's brilliant, reads at a 6th grade level, builds complex structures with Legos, asks questions that amaze his teachers. The photo showed a bright-eyed boy in a too large school uniform, grinning at the camera. Marcus goes to the same elementary school I did. Same broken windows, same outdated textbooks, same overcrowded classrooms. Meanwhile, kids in your neighborhood attend schools with science labs, computer centers, and art programs. Darius put his phone away. Tell me how that's merit-based. Savannah felt something shifting in her understanding. But funding comes from property taxes, which reflects community investment. Community wealth, Darius interrupted, but not harshly. Wealth that was built over generations when Black families were legally excluded from home ownership in neighborhoods like yours through redlining, restrictive covenants, and discriminatory lending practices. The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd heard these terms before, but never connected them to the reality sitting across from her. My great-grandfather was a sharecropper, Darius continued. My grandfather was the first in our family to own property, a small house he bought in 1965 when banks finally started lending to Black families. My father built on that foundation, becoming a successful attorney. I built on his foundation to get where I am today. That sounds like progress, Savannah said, though she sensed she was missing something important. It is progress. Remarkable progress, considering where we started. But your great-great-grandfather was building wealth through property ownership and business investment while mine was working for subsistence wages on someone else's land. That generational head start compounds over time. Darius signaled for more coffee, giving her time to process. I'm not asking for handouts or special treatment, he said finally. I'm asking for acknowledgement that the playing field was never leveled to begin with. And that merit has to be measured with that context in mind. Savannah sat quietly for several minutes, pieces of her worldview rearranging themselves in ways that felt both uncomfortable and inevitable. What does that mean practically? She asked. For people like me who want to do better but don't know how? It means listening more than talking. It means questioning systems you benefit from instead of just defending them. It means using your privilege to create opportunities for people who don't have your advantages. The scholarship program, Savannah said suddenly. The Heritage Foundation wants us to sponsor scholarships for underprivileged students. That could be a start, Darius agreed. If it's done right, if it focuses on removing barriers rather than just rewarding the few who manage to overcome them. For the first time in their conversation, Savannah felt hopeful rather than defensive. Would you help me understand how to do it right? Darius smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd seen from him. Yeah, I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Savannah stood in the conference room at Reed Commercial Properties, presenting the Heritage Foundation scholarship proposal to her father and the company's board of directors. She'd spent countless hours researching best practices, consulting with Darius, and crafting a program that would genuinely create opportunities rather than just offering token assistance. The program would provide full tuition plus living expenses and mentorship for 5 students annually, she explained, clicking through her presentation slides. Recipients would be selected based on academic potential, community involvement, and financial need, with a focus on first-generation college students. Board member Robert Chen nodded approvingly. The mentorship component is excellent. These students will need guidance navigating professional environments. Exactly, Savannah continued, feeling confident. We'd pair each scholarship recipient with a senior executive from our company or partner organizations. The goal is to provide not just financial support, but access to professional networks and career development opportunities. Her father studied the proposal carefully. The criteria seem reasonable. Academic achievement, community service, demonstrated work ethic. What safeguards do we have to ensure we're selecting students who share our values? Before Savannah could answer, Thomas Hamilton raised a concern. I appreciate the community service aspect, but we need to be careful about the types of activities we value. Some of these students might be involved in activist organizations that don't align with our corporate image. Savannah felt her stomach tighten. Could you be more specific about what concerns you? Well, Thomas exchanged glances with other board members. Students involved in protests, social justice organizations, that sort of thing. We want future business leaders, not agitators. But many forms of community service involve advocating for positive change, Savannah replied carefully. Students who organize food drives, tutor younger children, or work to improve their neighborhoods are demonstrating exactly the kind of leadership qualities we want to foster. Of course, Richard Reed interjected diplomatically. Thomas just means we should prioritize students focused on constructive community building rather than political activism. The distinction felt artificial and troubling to Savannah, especially after her conversations with Darius about systemic barriers. Students fighting for better educational resources or community investment weren't agitators. They were future leaders addressing real problems. I think we should trust the selection. Committee to identify students with genuine merit and character, she said firmly. The Heritage Foundation has been doing this work for 20 years. They understand how to evaluate applicants fairly. That's exactly what concerns me, Thomas replied. The Heritage Foundation has been influenced by current political trends. They might prioritize diversity over merit. They prioritize both, Savannah shot back, her frustration beginning to show. Merit isn't diminished by diversity, it's enhanced by including talented people from different backgrounds and perspectives. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Board members exchanged glances, clearly surprised by Savannah's passionate defense of the program. Her father cleared his throat. Savannah, could we speak privately for a moment? The board members filed out, leaving father and daughter alone in the conference room. Richard Reed's expression was concerned, but not angry. What's gotten into you? He asked gently. This isn't like you to be so emotional about business decisions. Maybe it's time I got emotional about things that matter, Savannah replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Daddy, we have the opportunity to genuinely help deserving young people succeed. Why are we looking for reasons to exclude them instead of embracing that chance? We're not trying to exclude anyone, her father said patiently. We're trying to be responsible stewards of company resources. These scholarships represent a significant financial commitment. We need to ensure they go to students who will reflect well on Reed commercial properties. And you don't think students from working-class backgrounds can reflect well on us? Richard Reed studied his daughter with growing concern. Of course they can, but we need to select carefully based on proven character and shared values. You seem to be suggesting we lower our standards. I'm suggesting our standards might be flawed. Savannah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. What if the reason there are so few people from certain backgrounds in positions of power isn't because they lack merit, but because the system makes it harder for them to demonstrate that merit? Her father sat back, clearly taken aback by her vehemence. Savannah, what's brought this on? Have you been talking to someone? Reading something? The question revealed how foreign her new perspective seemed to him. In his worldview, questioning established systems wasn't something she would do independently. It had to be the result of outside influence. "I've been paying attention, Daddy. Really paying attention for the first time." Savannah took a deep breath, trying to collect her thoughts. "Do you remember Linda Washington, the nurse I helped at the coffee shop? She works 12-hour shifts saving children's lives, but she can't qualify for housing near the hospital because our application requirements are designed for people who don't work shift schedules or have the kind of credit history that comes with generational wealth. That's unfortunate, but her father, Jerome, slipped and fell at the MARTA station while working his second job as a cleaning person. He's 68 years old, a Navy veteran, still working because his pension isn't enough to live on. And you know who stopped to help him? Who provided emergency medical care while everyone else just watched?" Richard Reed waited, sensing this was leading somewhere important. "A young black man named Darius Johnson. Army veteran, Northwestern MBA, runs his own consulting business. He saved Jerome's life, and he did it without thinking about recognition or reward or whether Jerome deserved help. He did it because it was right." "That's commendable," her father said carefully. "But I'm not sure what it has to do with our scholarship program." "It has to do with merit." Savannah's voice cracked with emotion. "Darius has more real character, more actual merit, more genuine leadership ability than half the people in our social circle. But he's spent his entire life having to prove himself in ways we never have, overcome barriers we never faced, demonstrate excellence to a standard we never had to meet." She stood up, pacing to the conference room windows that looked out over downtown Atlanta. "The scholarship recipients won't just reflect well on Reed commercial properties, Daddy. They'll make us better. They'll bring perspectives and insights and solutions to problems we didn't even know existed because we never had to face them." Richard Reed was quiet for a long moment, studying his daughter with new attention. "This Darius Johnson," he said. Finally, "You've been talking to him about these issues?" "Yes, and he's helped me understand that everything I thought I knew about fairness and merit and opportunity might be—" Savannah struggled for the right words. "Incomplete. Savannah, you're young and idealistic, which isn't necessarily bad. But you need to be careful about letting personal relationships influence business decisions. This young man may be charming and intelligent, but this isn't about charm, Daddy. It's about justice." The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight that surprised them both. Richard Reed had built his success through careful pragmatism, strategic thinking, and gradual progress. Justice was a word that implied current systems were fundamentally unjust, a conclusion that challenged everything he'd worked to build. "Justice," he repeated slowly. "Savannah, justice is important, but so is wisdom. So is protecting what we've built for future generations. You can't save the world by destroying the foundations of your own success. What if those foundations were built on other people's exclusion?" The question came out before she could stop it, carrying implications that shocked them both. For the first time in her life, Savannah saw her father look genuinely hurt. "Is that what you think of me? Of our family? That we succeeded by holding other people down?" "No," Savannah said quickly, regretting her words. "That's not what I meant. I meant, what if the system that helped us succeed also made success harder for others? What if we could honor your achievements while also working to make sure everyone has similar opportunities?" Richard Reed stood up, his expression closing off. "I think you need some time to consider what you're really saying, Savannah. This conversation has gotten away from both of us." He walked toward the door, then paused. "The board will meet again next week to finalize the scholarship criteria. I trust you'll approach that meeting with a clearer head and better perspective on our responsibilities to shareholders and stakeholders alike." As the door closed behind him, Savannah sank into her chair, emotionally exhausted. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross, challenged beliefs that formed the foundation of her family's identity. There was no going back to the comfortable certainty she'd once felt about her place in the world. But looking out at the city skyline, thinking about Jerome Washington and Linda and the violin girl from the car wash, she realized she didn't want to go back. The truth was messier and more complicated than the simple narrative she'd grown up with, but it was still the truth. Now she had to decide what she was willing to sacrifice to honor it. The following weekend, Savannah made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 2 months earlier. She drove to the community center where she'd witnessed the car wash fundraiser, this time not as an accidental observer, but as someone seeking to understand and contribute. Dorothy Miller greeted her with surprised recognition at the center's front desk. "Savannah, what brings you back to our neighborhood? I wanted to see more of your programs," Savannah replied honestly, "and to ask how I can help beyond just financial donations." Dorothy's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Come on, let me show you around. We're just getting started with Saturday morning activities." The tour revealed a world Savannah had never imagined. In one room, teenagers were learning computer programming from a volunteer who worked in tech. Another space buzzed with elementary school children receiving reading tutoring from high school students. The music room, small but vibrant, echoed with the sounds of donated instruments being played by eager young hands. "This is where miracles happen," Dorothy explained as they watched a 10-year-old girl practice violin. "These children have the same potential as kids anywhere, but they need extra support to overcome the obstacles in their way." Savannah recognized the violin player, the same girl who'd approached her car during the fundraiser. "How's she doing?" "With her lessons?" "Incredibly well. That $100 you gave her is paying for private instruction with a retired symphony member. She practices here every day after school." Dorothy lowered her voice. "Her great-grandfather really did play violin in juke joints during the 1940s when that was the only venue available to black musicians. She's carrying on a family legacy." In another room, Savannah encountered something that stopped her in her tracks. Darius Johnson sat at a table with 5 teenagers reviewing college application essays. His presence was both unexpected and somehow inevitable. Of course he would be here, volunteering his time and expertise. "I know this process seems overwhelming," he was telling a young woman who looked stressed and exhausted. "But you have something unique to offer colleges. Your perspective as someone who's overcome challenges they can't even imagine." The girl nodded, but doubt was evident in her expression. "Easy for you to say. You made it through. What if I'm not smart enough?" "Keisha," Darius said gently, "you're working 2 part-time jobs to help support your family while maintaining a 3.8 GPA in AP classes. You organized a food drive that fed 300 families last winter. You're not just smart enough, you're exactly what colleges need." Savannah watched the interaction with growing understanding. This was mentorship in its truest form, not networking or career advancement, but genuine investment in another person's potential. When the session ended, Darius approached her with curiosity rather than suspicion. "Didn't expect to see you here on a Saturday morning." "I'm trying to understand better," she replied. "Dorothy was showing me your programs. What do you think?" Savannah looked around the bustling center, taking in the energy and hope that filled every room despite the obvious resource constraints. "I think it's remarkable. I also think it's tragic that it's necessary." Meaning, these kids are brilliant. They're hardworking and motivated and full of potential, but they're having to work twice as hard as kids from my neighborhood to get half the opportunities. Savannah felt tears threatening. "That's not their failure. It's ours." Darius studied her face, apparently seeing something that satisfied him. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." He led her to a quiet corner where a woman in her 50s was reviewing financial aid forms with a college-bound senior. The woman looked up as they approached, and Savannah was struck by the intelligence and warmth in her eyes. "Mom," Darius said, "I'd like you to meet Savannah Reed." "Savannah, this is my mother, Dr. Angela Johnson." Savannah's assumptions shifted again. "Doctor, emergency medicine," Angela replied with a handshake that conveyed both strength and gentleness. "I work at Grady Hospital. Darius told me about your scholarship program. It sounds like exactly what these young people need. You heard about that?" Savannah glanced at Darius in surprise. "Word travels fast in this community," Angela smiled. "We're excited about the possibility of real partnership with Reed Commercial Properties." "Partnership," Savannah repeated, liking the sound of the word better than charity or aid. "That's what it should be," Angela continued. These students aren't looking for handouts. They're looking for opportunities to contribute. They want to give back to their communities, solve problems, build businesses, create jobs. They just need someone to believe in their potential enough to invest in it. Savannah spent the next hour listening to Angela and other community leaders discuss their vision for comprehensive youth development. They weren't asking for sympathy or special treatment. They were proposing solutions, partnerships, and mutual investment in shared success. The scholarship program could be just the beginning, explained Marcus Thompson, a local business owner who'd grown up in the neighborhood. If Reed Commercial Properties is genuinely committed to community partnership, there are opportunities for mentorship programs, internships, even joint ventures with young entrepreneurs. What would that look like practically? Savannah asked, her mind racing with possibilities. Start with the scholarships, but think bigger, Darius suggested. What if scholarship recipients interned at Reed Commercial Properties during summers? What if your company became a pipeline for diverse talent instead of just writing checks? The conversation continued for another hour, filled with concrete proposals and realistic timelines. These weren't dreamers asking for miracles. They were strategic thinkers offering sustainable solutions. Driving home, Savannah felt energized in a way she hadn't experienced since college. The scholarship program had evolved from a charitable gesture into something much more significant, a genuine partnership that could benefit everyone involved. But she also knew the real test would come Monday morning when she presented this expanded vision to her father and the board. They would see risks, where she now saw opportunities, complications where she saw solutions. That evening, she called Darius. "Thank you for today," she said, "for introducing me to your mother and the other community leaders, for helping me understand what partnership actually means." "Thank you for being willing to learn," he replied. "Most people in your position aren't. I have a board meeting Monday to finalize the scholarship criteria. They're going to push back against some of the broader partnership ideas. Probably. Change is always scary for people who benefit from current systems. What if I can't convince them? What if they decide the program is too risky or complicated?" Darius was quiet for a moment. "Then you'll have to decide what matters more, their approval or doing what's right." After hanging up, Savannah sat in her bedroom looking out at the manicured gardens that had symbolized success her entire life. Tomorrow she would walk into that boardroom with a choice, present a watered-down version of the program that wouldn't challenge anyone, or advocate forcefully for something that could genuinely create change. The decision wasn't really a choice at all. She'd seen too much, understood too much, to go backward. Whatever happened Monday morning, she would stand up for the partnership these young people deserve. For the first time in her life, Savannah Reed was ready to risk everything for something bigger than herself. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Monday morning arrived with Georgia's typical humid heat, but Savannah felt surprisingly calm as she prepared for the board meeting that would define her future with Reed Commercial Properties. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that conveyed professionalism while avoiding the designer ostentation that might undermine her message. The boardroom filled with familiar faces. Her father, Thomas Hamilton, Robert Chen, Margaret Thornton, and the other executives who'd shaped Atlanta's business landscape for decades. Savannah noticed the subtle tension in the room. Clearly, word of her previous outburst had circulated. "Before we discuss the scholarship program," Richard Reed began, "I think we should address the elephant in the room. Savannah, your passion for this project is admirable, but business decisions can't be made based on emotion alone." "You're right, Daddy. They should be made based on facts, evidence, and long-term strategic thinking." Savannah stood up, moving to the presentation screen. "Which is exactly what I've prepared for you today." She clicked to her first slide. Reed Commercial Properties Community Partnership Initiative, a business case for systemic change. Thomas Hamilton shifted uncomfortably. Systemic change sounds awfully political, Savannah. It's economically practical, she replied firmly. The demographics of Atlanta are shifting. 60% of the city's population is African American, but only 12% of our executive workforce reflects that reality. We're not just missing talent, we're missing market insights, community connections, and competitive advantages our rivals are beginning to capture. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics about Atlanta's changing economy. Companies with diverse leadership teams are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. They're also significantly better at identifying new market opportunities and avoiding costly missteps in community relations. Robert Chen leaned forward, interested despite himself. These are compelling numbers. But how does a scholarship program address workforce diversity? Because it's not just a scholarship program anymore, Savannah replied, clicking to reveal her expanded proposal. It's a comprehensive talent pipeline that benefits Reed Commercial Properties as much as the scholarship recipients. She outlined the program's evolution, summer internships that would give students real business experience while providing Reed Commercial Properties with fresh perspectives on community development projects, mentorship programs that would help senior executives understand changing market dynamics, joint ventures with young entrepreneurs that could open new revenue streams. The scholarship recipients aren't charity cases, Savannah emphasized. They're future business partners, community leaders, and innovative thinkers who can help us navigate Atlanta's changing landscape more effectively than our current approach. Margaret Thornton raised her hand. This sounds very idealistic, Savannah, but what about practical concerns? Cultural fit, communication styles, different work expectations? Savannah had expected this question. Margaret, those concerns assume that our current culture is perfect and shouldn't evolve. What if some of our traditions and communication styles are actually limiting our effectiveness? She clicked to a new slide showing recent business failures by established Atlanta companies that had failed to adapt to demographic changes. Brookstone Development lost the city's largest housing contract last year because they couldn't demonstrate meaningful community engagement. Harris & Associates was passed over for 3 major corporate diversity initiatives because their leadership team couldn't credibly represent inclusive values. Savannah looked directly at her father. We're not just missing opportunities. We're becoming irrelevant to significant portions of the market. The room was quiet, board members processing information that challenged their comfortable assumptions. Furthermore, Savannah continued, I've spent the last month researching best practices for community partnership programs. Companies like Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and even regional firms like SunTrust have discovered that authentic community investment doesn't just improve their reputation, it improves their bottom line. Thomas Hamilton cleared his throat. Those are national corporations with different stakeholder pressures than family-owned businesses like ours. Actually, family-owned businesses have more flexibility to take calculated risks on long-term strategies, Savannah countered. We don't have quarterly earnings calls or activist shareholders demanding short-term profits. We can invest in sustainable growth that benefits everyone. She clicked to her final slide, a detailed financial projection showing the program's costs versus projected returns through improved market penetration, enhanced reputation, and reduced recruitment costs for diverse talent. The numbers work, she said simply. But more importantly, it's the right thing to do. And in today's market, doing the right thing is also good business. Richard Reed studied the projections carefully. These assumptions about market penetration and reputation benefits. How confident are you in them? Confident enough to stake my career on them, Savannah replied, surprising herself with the boldness of her statement. The room went silent. Board members exchanged glances, clearly recognizing that this had become about more than a scholarship program. Savannah, her father said carefully, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that Reed Commercial Properties can be a leader in Atlanta's changing economy, or we can become irrelevant defending outdated practices. I'm saying that this program represents not just our values, but our competitive future. She paused, gathering courage for her next words. And I'm saying that if we can't embrace this opportunity, then perhaps I'm not the right person to lead our marketing division. Margaret Thornton gasped softly. Even for a family business, threatening resignation over a community program was unprecedented. You're willing to leave the company over this? Thomas Hamilton asked incredulously. I'm willing to leave a company that chooses comfort over growth, tradition over innovation, and prejudice over opportunity, Savannah replied firmly. But I'd much rather stay and help us become everything we're capable of being. Robert Chen broke the tension. The financial projections are actually quite conservative. If we're only half as successful as these estimates suggest, the program pays for itself within 3 years. And the marketing benefits are significant, added another board member. We've been struggling to differentiate ourselves from competitors, who all offer similar services. Community leadership could be a genuine competitive advantage. Richard Reed looked at his daughter with an expression she couldn't read. Pride, concern, surprise, and something else she'd never seen before. Respect. The board will need time to discuss this privately, he said finally. Savannah, thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. We'll vote and have an answer for you by end of business today. As the board members filed out for their closed session, Savannah remained in the conference room, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. She'd said everything she needed to say, presented every argument she could muster, and made her position clear. Whatever happened next, she'd stood up for something that mattered more than her own comfort or family expectations. For the first time in her privileged life, Savannah Reed had chosen principle over approval, growth over security, and justice over tradition. Her phone buzzed with a text from Darius. How did it go? She typed back. I either just saved my career or ended it. Either way, I told the truth. His response came immediately. Then you won, regardless of what they decide. Looking out the conference room window at downtown Atlanta, Savannah realized he was right. She had won something more valuable than approval or even employment. She'd won the right to respect herself, regardless of what anyone else thought about her choices. Now she just had to wait and see if her family's business was ready to grow alongside her.